guys. Yes, Ian Benjamin. Thank you all for attending today. It's a good event. We've got a lot packed in, a lot to pack in today. So just general sort of housekeeping. So basically, today's event packed with information about careers, how to elevate your career, choosing a contract role versus a permanent role. I'm going to kind of give you some insights into that to help you kind of make those decisions, especially with how the market has changed in 2023 with the drop-off in permanent roles. I'm just talking to Adam, who's going to be the first guest speaker today, about the increase in contracting opportunities versus permanent roles. And then we're going to hand over to Rosie and Dajour. Rosie and Dajour, they both work in-house as in-house recruiters in the data division for the global media company Omnicom, part of the OMD group. So we're blessed again to have both of these experts in their field talking to you about contracts and permanent roles after Adam's bits on, or segment on, demystifying contracting and IR35 and umbrella payments as well. And then to end, drum roll, we've got Mr. Philip Sewell. Philip is known to a lot of you, who was the guest speaker at our Salesforce event in September. And so Philip has been in the world of data for a long, long time, even though he looks really, really young. And he's going to be talking to you about his journey managing imposter syndrome along the way to reaching the excels of his career to date. So Philip is the CEO, also the founder and CEO of Predictable, a highly valued company that's involved in data consultancy for the hospitality and retail sector. They're two of the areas that he specializes in, or his company, growing company, specializes in. So what we'll do, we'll have questions and answers after each segment, with Adam's taking that first. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Adam, and let's get it started. Thank you, Adam.
Fantastic, thanks very much. Well, let's see if we can get this working straight away. So does that all come up on the screen okay for you?
Yep.
Fantastic. So thanks for the invitation, Ian. It's great to be here today. As mentioned, I'm going to be attempting to demystify IR35 and answer as many questions for you as I can. To tell you a little bit about Fair Pay Services, we are an umbrella company, been established since January 2019. I set the company up myself, and I've grown it to a point we work with probably about 250 different contracting recruitment agencies now, pay in the region of about 150 monthly paid contractors and about 450, 500 weekly paid contractors across loads of different disciplines, everything from sort of low-end roles, minimum wage, right up to doctors, nurses, loads of tech roles, data, enterprise architecture, etc. So we get a real good view of the space. I'm an ex-recruiter myself. I ran an agency for around 15 years prior to doing this, so got a very well-rounded knowledge of both sides of the sector. We have a very strong focus on compliance and candidate welfare, got multiple compliance accreditations with the FCSA, Professional Passport, we're APSCO Trusted Partners, we're partners to an organisation called Jobs Aware, which is very worker focused. If you've got any issues with employment, contracting, taxation, rather than trying to find the best government department that you should make your complaint to, you can go straight to Jobs Aware. They'll signpost, they'll manage it, they'll make sure that you get the right outcome. So we're very proud to be kind of part of that network and promote the good practice. So without further ado, if we move on to IR35, we're going to cover what IR35 actually is, how it's used to determine your employment status as a contractor, some key factors that are required to determine that status, something called the small company exemption to the new rules, what is inside and outside IR35. You might have heard that term sort of tabled around various roles, but what does it actually mean? Penalties and consequences for getting things wrong, and then the benefits of working on a PAYE basis, whether that's through an umbrella company like ourselves or direct for an organisation, agency, or whoever's actually giving you the contract. and then we'll sort of have an open floor for any questions that you might have. So IR35 itself is just a short name which is used for the intermediaries legislation. So this was originally brought in around 2000, and it's kind of mutated over the years. It's basically a set of tax rules that apply if you work for a client through another intermediary, and that intermediary would be a limited company typically that you, the contractor, might set up. So rather than being paid directly by the client or the agency, you might set up a limited company which is more tax efficient. And if you do that, these IR35 rules apply to you. So there's a couple of changes. Obviously, it was 2000 originally. 2017, they brought in the off-payroll rules into the public sector. So this was public sector organisations such as education, healthcare, even like the BBC, places like that, everything that's a public sector government-funded organisation. Rather than the contractors assessing their own status, taking all the risk and being pursued for any wrongdoing directly by HMRC, they put the onus on the client. So the overall organisation had to assess the entire workforce that was through limited companies, and if they got it wrong, they were getting the bill. So massive fines were laid out in the public sector space. DWP, Department for Work and Pensions, I think they had something like a £250 million fine for wrongly assessing status. But I think it's kind of wooden dollars with government money. They were using it to make a point before the private sector rules came in. So 2021, 6th of April, off-payroll rules came into the private sector. So basically brought every other UK organisation into scope. So taking the onus away from the contractor, putting it on the client. So what tended to happen there was clients took a blanket approach in a lot of cases and said, we're not going to assess anyone's status. It's not worth our risk. We can't stomach a 50 million, a 10 million, a 20 million pound tax bill from HMRC if we get it wrong. So they basically put a stop to a lot of limited company contractors and said, you've got to work on payroll now. So whether that was paid directly by the agency or via an umbrella company, that was kind of the direction of travel. So in terms of determining that status, if they did want to do a status determination and find out if you were inside or outside and allow you to work through a limited company, what the hirer has to do is assess the role. So they have to answer a set of questions about the role itself. Does it look like employment or does it look like a business relationship? And then they have to assess the contractor and see if the behaviours of the contractor match the outcome of that questionnaire. And this, as I said, it covers public sector bodies, large companies and medium companies in the UK, puts that responsibility to assess the status with the hirer. The risk of HMRC challenge is actually with the fee payer. So if you're through an agency, the agency that paid the limited company might actually get the bill for the client getting determination wrong, which is a very backwards way of looking at it. But then it puts everybody on the hook because the agency would pay the bill, the agency would pursue the client. So everybody's got skin in the game, rather than somebody just making a determination, passing it down, and that's the end of it. And the only exception to these rules is small companies, which we'll come on to shortly. So when they're determining employment status, there's some tools that are available to the clients. There's one called CEST, which some people may have heard of, which is check employment status for tax. This is HMRC's own tool, and because it's their tool, it's got a bad rep. The answers are probably weighted towards giving an inside IR35 outcome, which basically says that you're a disguised employee and you should pay taxes like an employee. Because of this, lots of third-party tools have been developed and lots of private organisations like QDOS sell one, and it's kind of on a subscription model. And a lot of these subscription model ones that are probably fairer in the outcome, some of them have got insurance backing. So as long as the questions are answered correctly, the insurance would actually indemnify any tax risk. So you might find employment agencies that you sign up with as a contractor, if there's an outside IR35 decision that's made that says you can be paid through a limited company, you can be paid as a business person rather than an employee, you might find that the report that comes along with that is QDOS or something similar, and there'll be insurance behind that, so it takes a lot of the risk away. What this is called, it's called a status determination statement. So it's the outcome of the report and it has to be completed for every contract. So the role that you go for is a contract in its own right, and that role's got to be assessed, and you've got to be assessed by it. If there's another role within the business, that's got to be assessed as well. And the SDS will be basically based on the outcome of that assessment. So it produces a report, and the hirer, so the client that you might be working for, not the agency, but the actual client, they have to pass it to you, the limited company contractor, and the party below it in the supply chain. So that's normally a recruitment agency, but they could be the hirer and the fee payer themselves if they were just directly engaging a contractor. But normally there'd be a recruitment agency in the mix. There could be longer supply chains where you've got what's called like an RPO, which is almost like a supply chain management company. So they could sit between the agency and the client. So it would be a case of passing it down the supply chain until it gets back to the one that's going to pay the limited company. Once the end hire has passed that status determination on, it loses that liability as a fee payer and it passes it down the supply chain. But if they fail to do that, or they don't assess the role, or they just don't pass it on and they don't give it to the contractor, they retain that liability as fee payer. So they would be pursued directly. Very important that the contractual chain is followed and this nation statement is passed on. So the most important thing is key factors in how they determine your status. So when they're filling out the questionnaire, what they're looking for is signs of employment. So is there control in the workplace? So if you've got to turn up at a particular time and work so many hours or days a week, it leans more towards employment than business. So that would suggest that there's control in the workplace, and that would point more towards inside IR35 for employment. Are you able to send a substitute? So you've agreed a contract for the works. Is it an overall contract that says, okay, I've been engaged to build this website and start to finish, I'm going to get X amount of thousands of pounds for doing it? Or am I going to go in and do so many hours a week until the website's done? Can I send a substitute in my place? If I don't want to go in and I've got some other business I need to attend to, can I send a suitably qualified replacement to just get on with that? If you can't do that, probably leaning towards employment. If you can, it's probably more business. So you can kind of see where this is going. It's more common sense, mutuality of obligation. Does the client have to offer you work? Do you have to accept the work? If you do, it's probably employment. Financial risk, if you do something wrong, will you still be paid? If the work's not to the required standard, will you still be paid, or will you have to go back in your own time to complete that until it is of the required standard? So these are all things that every role is assessed on, and you would be assessed on as a contractor. You can't load the answers to get the outcome you want, because the answers have got to reflect the reality. If they don't, and HMRC have challenged, the first thing they're going to look at is the status determination questionnaire, and then they're going to go and interview everybody to ask the questions about the reality of the role. If they don't stack up, then it's not worth the paper it's printed of. If it does reflect reality and it points towards outside IR35 and all of your behaviours are outside IR35, then you've got a very strong position there and very unlikely to get challenged for loss of tax. So we mentioned earlier about small company exemption. This applies to the actual company that you'll be performing your services to. So if you could be recruited by a massive recruitment agency, say, I don't know, Reed Employment, multi-million-pound business, but it's the company that they place you at as a contractor that is looked at for this small company exemption. So if that end hirer is a small IT firm and they've got less than £10 million turnover, less than £5 million worth of assets, or less than 50 employees, as long as two of the three apply to them, we're kind of back to the old 2000 rules. So the client doesn't have to assess your status. The client doesn't take any risk. It's down to you as the contractor. So you might want to use the HMRC assess tool for your own peace of mind to get your report. And you can Google it, just CEST. It will come straight up as a Google search. It would be your responsibility to assess that status. You could play fast and loose with it and just say, I'm outside IR35, pay me through a limited company, but you've got no defence then. But at least if you've done a assessed report, and you've answered it truthfully and honestly, and you've liaised with the client over how the role's going to be performed, you've checked it against the contract that you've agreed, then you've got a stronger case. If it all goes wrong, you're at risk of a HMRC challenge for unpaid taxes, because obviously you pay less taxes through a limited company than you would in employment. So as a contractor, it's just worth being aware of that. If you're working for a small end client, there is this small company exemption, which has its benefits because you get to decide your own fate in terms of whether you're inside or outside IR35, but it does come with its risks. So we've mentioned inside and outside IR35. So what's the difference? So inside IR35, you're basically considered to be an employee of the end client. So you're subject to PAYE taxes. In that case, you have to operate a PAYE scheme, whether that's direct with the client or the agency, or through an umbrella payroll like ourselves. If you're outside IR35, you're considered to be operating as a business. So you can receive income through your limited company, and you, as a director of that company, can decide how you're paid from that. So you can pay yourself a full salary if you want to. You can pay yourself a small salary. You can take dividends on the profits. You can liaise with your accountant to work out the most tax efficient way of doing that. So yeah, taxation inside and outside. So if you're inside, you're basically going to pay PAYE tax and national insurance on your gross pay. On top of that, employment costs will have to be paid by the employer, and that is employers' national insurance, apprenticeship levy. They go directly to the government. They're just taxes. Employers' pension contributions that go into your pension. Holiday pay that you have to be paid in addition to the hours that you work. If you're working through an umbrella company, you'd get the PAYE rate plus all of these employment costs and the umbrella margin. So that's the money that we make, which is typically about £60 a month. So all of that gets added to the PAYE rate, which creates what's called a contract rate. So you'd get paid you'd agree the contract rate with the agency or the client. These deductions would come out. You would be no worse off than a PAYE employee, but you'd have extra benefits. But whether you're paid by an umbrella company or direct by the agency or the client, you would be an employee. So you'd be covered on their insurances and protected with your employment status. If you're outside IR35, as we said, that suggests that you're more in business rather than employment. You can be paid all salary, combination of salary and dividends. You would need an accountant to administer your limited company. Generally, accountancy fees could be like £1,000 to £2,000 a year. Whether you trade for 1 week or 1 year, it's the same, because you agree a fee up front for them to do your bookkeeping and your end of year account submission. And because you're in business, you would require business insurances. So you would need public liability insurance, probably professional indemnity cover for your profession. And that would vary depending on the role. And in fact, actually stipulates that you're liable for. They're just things to bear in mind if you are going to go outside IR35 to be tax efficient. You've got to think of yourself as a true, genuine business. So as you said, penalties and consequences, if it all goes wrong, in a medium or a large size company or a public sector body, the liability sits with the fee payer. So HMRC would go to the person that's physically made that payment to your limited company. If their challenge was successful and the tax tribunal said, no, you're definitely inside IR35, these taxes need to be collected, it wouldn't be you, the contractor, that's pursued, it's the company that's paid your company. They could then potentially pursue the end client for the loss for making an incorrect decision, but that would be a contractual claim and nothing to do with you again. As it currently stands, HMRC can't set off any taxes already paid. So if you've paid some PAYE, some national insurance, some dividends, all of that is completely disregarded, and HMRC are going after the fee payer for the entire loss. So essentially what they're doing is over collecting tax. And there is a proposed legislative change going on to address this, because it's obviously not fair that you've paid tax and then they're going to collect it again from the company. So if it goes through, it's going to apply from 6th of April next year. And what it will do is take into account any tax that you've already paid as a contractor and then just collect the balance from the fee payer. So it doesn't really benefit the contractor any further, but it does kind of protect the fee payer and the client from having to pay over and above. But again, that's not in stone yet. That's just proposed legislation that's going through. Benefits of working on a PAYE basis. Again, that could be direct through the client or through an umbrella company like ourselves. You'll be employed, so all of your income is subject to PAYE. It's all dealt with on a weekly or monthly basis. So as long as there's no material changes, you're not going to get a big tax bill at the end of the year. You haven't got to account for any of that. There's no requirement to consider inside, outside IR35. IR35 only applies to limited companies. So if you're paid on a PAYE basis, it's a complete irrelevance. You just get on with the role for the rate that you've agreed. There's no risk of IR35 challenge, so you're not going to find yourself tied up giving evidence to a tax tribunal. Whether or not you're liable for the loss, you would be there to give evidence. So it's a time thing, it's a stress thing. There's no accountant's charges because you're paid on a PAYE basis. You don't need to do a tax return, and you get full protection of being employed. So going back a couple of years, furlough scheme was a great example. All of the umbrella contractors that assignments got affected by COVID, they were protected by the furlough scheme. Limited company contractors, there was little to no protection. Company directors kind of got hung out to dry on that one. Statutory benefits such as holiday pay, sick pay, maternity pay, paternity pay, adoption pay, they all come into play as an employee. So there's a lot more protection of working on a PAYE basis. So appreciate that's a fairly quick whistle-stop tour there. I'd be happy to go into further detail if anyone wants to reach out directly, but equally happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Superb. Adam, thanks for that. Thanks for clarifying that. So essentially I've got a quick question before wrapping it up. So basically the examples, are there any other sort of examples where somebody may work outside of IR35 in terms of the reason why I do it? I mean, you kind of mentioned it there with the small companies, 10 point something million in turnover. That allows an opportunity for you to work outside of it. Are there any other sort of like other reasons how that may happen?
It's mainly from an attractability and a taxation point of view. So if you've got the opportunity to work outside IR35, it is going to be more tax efficient for you, because if you considered like the overall package with employment costs, holiday pay, PAYE and national insurance, off of a contract rate of say £1,000, you might suffer about 40-45% loss when you take all of that into account. If you looked at a limited company engagement for the same thing with corporation tax, dividend tax and a small director salary, you might be looking at about 30%. So it's more tax efficient to be outside if you can be, but as I say, it comes with its own risks.
Yeah.
You might find a public sector body, a large company, a medium company that's done the assessment and they're really comfortable that it is outside and they're still prepared to work on an outside IR35 basis through your company. It does happen. But we've got some very, very large clients that just completely refuse it now. They just say that we'd rather pay the contractors more on an inside IR35 basis to kind of compensate them for that loss and know that they're not building up a huge liability. Like we had some contractors that were, I mean, anything from 500, 600, 700 a day up to 1,200 a day prior to the rules changing in April 21. And they were going backwards and forwards between us and the client, renegotiating the rate to say, well, okay, I was on 800 a day. I'm now going to suffer the additional employer's national insurance through the umbrella company engagement.
Increase the money, increase the day rate, essentially.
Absolutely, yeah. Put the rate up 11%, 12%, 13%, whatever that negotiation point was to get it right, so that contractor felt that it was still viable for them to go on. But as a client, they're not playing fast and loose with HMRC and potentially being landed with a 20-30 million pound tax bill further down the line for like untold amounts of contractors. So commercially, it kind of made more sense for them to do that negotiation, pay a bit more upfront for the contractors they did want to retain. And then those that they weren't so worried about, it was kind of, this is the rate, take it or leave it.
Gotcha.
So,
Superb. Thanks for clarifying that. Anyone else got any questions? Anyone got any questions for Adam about IR35 or contracting? Stick your hand up or speak up.
Yeah, I've got a question. So some companies, for example, if you're going to have a contract, they'll say we have a preferred supplier list. Is that something that is a preference towards a company, or is that something that could be like legal for a contractor to take on?
Yeah, so you do come across that a lot. Some clients will absolutely insist on their preferred supplier list and say, if you're going to take this role and you're going to go through an umbrella company, you've got to be paid by one of these three. These are the only ones we work with. And we do see that more often than not for a skilled contractor, as long as it's a compliant umbrella company. So something like an FCSA accredited member, of which there's something like 70 options, an APSCO trusted partner, a professional passport accreditation. As long as they've got one of these accreditations, it shows that they've been audited, they've been tested. Most clients would be open to use the contractor's choice. Doesn't always work, but there's no legal requirement that you would have to use theirs. But if they insist on it, that's a commercial decision. If you really want that role and they're not going to budge, you might just have to go with it, or vote with your feet. And it all depends on your gut feel. If you were presented with two options, and those two options, you might look online, get a load of reviews and think, God, I'm not going with them, because there's loads of reviews for shortchanging this, mistaxing, taking extra deductions and hiding things. Then if that was me, I'd go back to the client and say, look, I'm really not happy with these choices. These have got awful reviews. I'm not going to be employed by them. This is my money, my employment. I've got a company that I'm happy with, I'm prepared to work with. Will you entertain that? If not, we'll part company. That's just a kind of decision that you might have to make. More often than not, as a skilled contractor, most clients would be open to a discussion, as long as it's a realistic one.
Cool.
Thank you.
Cool. Anybody else? Any questions for Adam? Going once, going twice. Okay. Adam, I want to say thank you so much for that.
No problem.
For giving the insight.
No problem at all. If anyone wants to reach out separately, take my details and feel free to. And yeah, happy to speak to you all.
Definitely. And I think Adam's details, and Blaze has kindly put Adam's LinkedIn information in the chat. So you can kind of reach out to Adam on LinkedIn with any questions. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Brilliant. So we are going to move on to the next segment. So we are going to be blessed, I should say, by Rosie and Dajour. They are data recruiters from Omnicom Media, to kind of give you both of them will give you an insight into contract roles versus a permanent role. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Rosie and Dajour. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for having us, Ian. I'm really enjoying the event so far. So my name is Dajour. I sit within the central recruitment team here at Omnicom Media Group, part of the data team, as you've said, and I work very closely with Rosie.
My name's Rosie, again, part of Central Services, Omnicom Media Group. Dajour and I are the only two data recruiters, actually, for Omnicom UK. And yeah, we look after everything from kind of data science, data engineering, data architecture, generative AI within data, within media, and also focusing more on the marketing science element of it as well. Okay, so who are we? Ian has very kindly introduced us. So we are Omnicom Media Group, who are a global media agency. So really any country that you can think of that may have a media campaign, or an organisation who would have a need for a media campaign, Omnicom will have some kind of subsidiary that works within that company. We have a portfolio of world-class clients, such as the ones I've listed below, the likes of McDonald's, John Lewis, Marks and Spencer's. And we tend to work across lots of different verticals or industries, such as automotive, financial, e-commerce, retail, and digital entertainment. The type of work that we do for these clients can range from anything from media planning, media buy-in, strategy within media, digital marketing within there, and also the data element of it as well.
So as Rosie alluded to, so being a global media agency, we do have some subsidiary agencies that sit below us as well. So they are a PhD, who have two teams, a UK market team and a global market team. We've got OMD, who again, they have two teams, a UK market team and an EMEA market team. We've got Hearts and Science. And lastly, we've got Manning Gottlieb. Some people know as MG, some people know as MG OMD, and some people, hey, they just see it as letters, quite frankly. And then lastly, centrally within OMG, we've got an agency called Analect. And Analect is our Center of Excellence agency. That's where our most technical data people sit, typically within our data engineering, software engineering teams, and they would collaborate with the wider data teams at our agencies, so often help on supporting some of their projects. In addition to that, they would then work on building our own in-house tools that we use, such as Omni, which is a marketing platform that allows you to do anything within marketing, as well as being able to create industry-wide use tools, such as some of those aspects that you see on Facebook's API. So Analytics really and truly, it does sit within the center of our business. You know, I like to refer to them as the brains of the business, really. You know, we have our digital performance teams that are hands-on and activating the campaigns. You know, we have our insights teams that they're kind of like doing a bit more research into that. We have our analyst teams that are then kind of like building out models to then be able to make predictions and understand how our campaigns are performing. And then ultimately, you know, where our data teams sit is just being able to have a much deeper dive into the data, understanding the data, being able to make accurate forecasts on what making changes in our media spend, on what that would do, whether that's positive or negative. So just overall, you know, we've put the data at the heart of our business, which then supports our wider teams. So a bit about permanent roles. You might think, oh, yay, you know, contracting's cool. But what about permanent roles? What are some of the reasons why you could? Well, firstly, when you're sitting in a full-time permanent role, you do have a bit of job security in the sense that you don't have. Sorry, excuse me. So I'm just a bit low at the moment. So if I catch shortness of breath, I do apologize. But yeah, no. So in terms of security, you know, it's the case of, you know, you've got a job for life. You don't have to worry about your contract having an expiry date or things like that. You know, it just comes down to, you know, as long as you're performing well in your role, then there's no reason for you to then be put on performance review or be terminated. And then next into benefits. So when you are a full-time permanent employee, you know, your benefits are, you know, they are substantially more attractive. You know, you have things like access to pension schemes, private healthcare, annual leave, redundancy payments if unfortunately it goes that way. And then as well, which one I think is really, really important, is that a benefit in itself of being in a permanent role is that if you are looking to buy a house, for example, lenders or mortgage brokers or banks or whatnot, they tend to look at people who are in permanent roles as a bit more secure buyers, as opposed to somebody who is contracting. And the reason for that is because you've got fixed income, is guaranteed income. There's not going to be any fluctuations. There's not going to be, you know, any possible, I suppose, humps in the road and things like that. So from that perspective, it is definitely an added benefit as well as you being able to think about, you know, the benefits that you can have longer term within your company. In terms of once you've then immersed yourself into your agency or your company, should I say, you're able to start to develop your softer skills, you know, so you're able to think about, you know, people management. You're able to think about how you can start to learn and develop, and you're able to start thinking about ways in which you can progress your career further, in which you can then start to say, hey, I'm doing quite right. Or equally, you can find out sometimes that you have skills that you never really knew that you had. And what that can allow you to do is be cross-trained or upskilled in other areas. And this is something that we do. We offer something called internal mobility, which allows people to have a bit of flexibility of moving around within the agency. So what I mean by that is, so for example, if you are, say, you're a data scientist, and you've decided for whatever reason, you know, you want to move away from machine learning algorithms and you want to transition into maybe more of an analyst role, that is something that is certainly possible, and being able to have that training and development and be put on a personal development plan to help you with that transition is something that you will certainly see more of in a permanent role. And lastly, culture. The more you got, the longer you're in your companies, the more you can like immerse yourself, the more you can add to the culture and the healthy culture, and the more you can kind of encourage not just your peers, but also, you can just encourage people generally to just be themselves, bring their true selves to work. And ultimately, hey, you're more likely to be happier in that way, because if you're in a situation where you feel like you're having to put on a facade or you're having to change because of your working environment, then ultimately, it does put a lot of pressure on you. Whereas when you've sat in your company for a while and you've helped add to the company culture, it often will help you feel a lot more settled, secured, and ultimately work on better for your performance. Now, with that being said, there's not all bells and whistles, and it's not all positive working in the permanent role. Some of the negatives, it can include things like sometimes you could be stuck working on a project or a client account that you're not really keen on, or you feel like you've gotten to a point where it's no longer challenging you enough from a technical perspective. And sometimes that can be quite tedious, and then you can feel like your career progression becomes quite stagnant. Additionally, you can find that within permanent roles, sometimes depending on how teams are structured, in terms of like promotions and progressions, sometimes it can be quite limited after a certain level, because of course, naturally, at more junior levels, there's a lot more people, and then as you start to work your way up into more senior levels, it kind of starts to funnel down, and then there's less people at senior level, and that's something that some people they struggle with that. And which, is quite understandable. We all want to keep progressing, keep getting better, and becoming the best possible versions of ourselves. So there are definitely some positives and negatives to permanent roles, but you should definitely consider overall what you think is best for you.
Sure. So looking more, I suppose, at contract roles and why you may choose to go contracting. So flexibility is a huge one, a huge reason why people tend to go contracting. You may be at a stage in your life where, for whatever reason, you want to do a bit of traveling. You're maybe thinking about having a family. You're maybe thinking about, moving to a different country or exploring something new. Flexibility with contracting is because you can take 3-month contracts, you can take 6-month contracts, and in between those different contracts, you can take some time off. So you could do a 3-month contract, travel for a month, come back, take another 3-month contract, travel for another month, and really it's up to you to decide how you run your working year. You can also become an expert in your niche area. And this is something that often contractors will get headhunted within the market, particularly within the data market, because it is a very candidate short market, meaning that everything we do in media, in any organization now, as Dajour said, data is essentially the brains behind it. It gives you the insights, it gives you the understanding of what's working, why it's working, and how you should move forward within. So all of a sudden you can become a very sought after person within the market for a particular organization who needs an element of data work done within there. That can also, the more contracts you continue to take, the more, industries you work within, the more, different projects that you work within, you can advise and give expert advice on a particular area within your market. Financial gain, Adam touched on this beautifully, particularly if you're outside of IR35. It is a huge benefit to go on contracting. Typically within the data market, once you're established and have established your niche area within there, your day rate can sometimes be anywhere between 800 and £1,000 a day, which is massive compared to a permanent role. Industry exposure is also huge. So I think industry, particularly in recruitment at the minute, is a big focus for recruiters. I think, you can be very technical and you can create great technical problems or technical solutions. But if it doesn't reflect what the client needs it to do for its business, it's not necessarily a job well done. So by moving cross industry or choosing to stay within an individual industry, such as financial industry, such as e-commerce, such as public sector, healthcare, not-for-profit, you can really advise the client on why they should do what they should do, and not only what that means from a technical point of view, but actually what it does for the users of your system or the users of the infrastructure that you're creating from a technical point of view. It can also create routes to business opportunities. So you can become, a director of a limited organization. And what you have the opportunity to do then, as Adam mentioned as well, is if you're not able to fulfill that work, you can send somebody in on your behalf. A great example of somebody I know who has done this within the market. So I'm not sure if you've heard of Hitachi Systems. They're a huge global software consultancy. There was a guy in the UK called Glenn Powell who found a very niche area within business systems, CRM systems for not-for-profit organizations or fundraising organizations. So he identified him, like I mentioned, as an expert within that market. And when he started to realize that there were many fundraisers, many charities that were needing this element of business systems, he was able to hire people underneath him and train them in that niche area of the market. What he then was able to do within 2 years was gain Microsoft partner status, which in the Microsoft world means you are a recognized Microsoft partner. They are somebody they would recommend to implement their software on your behalf. So all of these things would be, very good reasons of why you would want to go contracting. But again, there is always a kind of, not necessarily a negative, but something for you to weigh up when considering what you should do. Contracting can be risky, particularly, unfortunately, in the last couple of years where we've seen more volatile markets. Contracting, they only have to give you maybe up to 2 weeks notice period, and they are expensive for an organisation, particularly if they are outside IR35. So if we're going into an economic downturn or some of the situations we've seen over the last few years, sometimes contractors will be the first people they will cut to try and balance their book and make sure their operating income is still in line with their revenue targets and in line with their overall business performance. Some of the other negatives can be sometimes you can feel isolated. You go into an organization for 3 months, you get the job done and you leave again. Again, due to the, I would suppose, stricter rules after the IR35 came in, it's unlikely that you would be invited to a Christmas party or a team day, a team event, because again, this can see as a more, of an employment role rather than a business role or a specialist role within an organization. And some of the other things are that, if you focus or you seem to gain, for example, contracts within the financial industry, and after, a year or 2 years, you think, actually, I'm not really enjoying the financial industry. That can be, sometimes where your experience is pigeonholed then. In the next slide, we'll talk about a few things about, I suppose, how to balance the positives and negatives and what kind of path that you can take to make sure that some of these downsides either don't fall into your career path.
So overall, so that there are, as we've said, so, there are lots of benefits to both contracting and permanent roles. But we would always encourage you to just kind of like think about your situation, think about what's best for you at the time, maybe trying to plan ahead, and just think about what's going to ultimately is going to benefit you the most from a career development perspective, from a work-life balance perspective, and overall, what would make you happy. Because I think that ultimately, in an ideal world, we'd all wake up tomorrow as billionaires. We never have to go back to work again, and that would be a dream come true. Unfortunately, the realities of life is, hey, we've all got to get up and we've all got to earn a living. So what I always say to people is, a couple of things that you should always try and consider is, one, the job that you're doing, is it something that you're happy doing? Because, if you're happy doing it, then, it's less of a slug when you get up in the morning. So, okay, gotta go to work. You don't really want to be going into a role, whether it's contracting or permanent. You don't really want to be waking up and it's a bit of a slugfest getting into the office. You want to say, hey, do you know what? Going into work today, gonna be a bit stressful. Gonna have some challenges I'm gonna have to overcome. But you know what? It's all right. I'm ready to take it on. Think about kind of like what is ideally what you're looking for, and what I mean by ideally looking for in terms of understanding what it is that you're good at, understanding what you're not so good at, and how you would like to be developed in what your weaknesses are. And, what I often would say to my candidates, that we all have our areas for development. We all have our weaknesses, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just about finding ways that how do we learn how do we retain information, and how do we then find ways of becoming better? So what I'd always say is that irrespective of whether you're looking for a contract role or a permanent role, whenever you're kind of like sitting down and discussing a role, think about having conversation with the hiring manager to say, okay, so you've highlighted to me what my strengths are, which is why you would like for me to, proceed into this role. But equally, in terms of my developments, this is the way how I like to be taught, and what support is there available for me to get better. So overall, we would say that there is no right answer to whether it's better to go contracting or permanent, because there's always going to be caveats, and then there's always going to be positives and negatives on both sides. But overall, it's just about kind of like weighing up overall the bigger picture, what is best for you, what works best, and ultimately will give you the best work-life balance and also the best quality of life.
Cool. Dajour and Rosie, guys, listen, I'm just conscious of time. Just whizzed past. No, it's not your fault at all. I know Philip's got he's got a 1 o'clock hard stop. So what I want to do is have the Q&A for yours and Dajour's section at the end, after Philip's. Sorry about that, but I mean, it was great. I've got some questions I want to ask you as well. I'm sure other people in the room have as well. But I need to kind of introduce Philip Sewell to everybody. Philip Sewell, for you guys who don't know, Philip has been in the data industry for a long time. He now currently runs his own business, his own company, called Predictable. Predictable is consultancy that provides data insights for hospitality and also for the retail sector. On that journey, various imposter syndromes, second doubting yourself, and so forth has kind of played out in everyone's life, really, me included. I'm kind of going through it now, to be fair. So Philip's going to kind of touch on that, about his experiences, how he's overcome those situations when they arise. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Philip, and then we kind of jump back in with Rosie and Dajour's questions at the end, as well as Philip's that I could probably pick up on if need be. So Philip, over to you.
Yeah, cheers, Ian. Yeah, sorry, I do have a 1 o'clock hard stop, but I suppose I've got no slides, and I just wanted to talk about, as Ian mentioned, imposter syndrome. And I think the first thing in terms of when Ian asked me to talk about imposter syndrome and my career, which has been quite long, I'm 48 years old and I've been in retail for 25 years. It's been a journey, and I think the first thing I wanted to do was kind of just baseline a definition of imposter syndrome, because actually everybody's got a different definition when you ask them about imposter syndrome. So here's my definition of imposter syndrome: it's someone who feels like a fraud intellectually and or professionally, i.e. you don't feel like you belong at the table. Now, let's just add another layer to that with regards to being black, which fuels this definition. So that feeling of belonging or not belonging, where too often, as black professionals, we're the only person in that boardroom or in a meeting. And I started to reflect on that, and they say, so what if you're the only person in the room? But actually, if you think about a lot of your lived experiences, mine included, actually, where does that come from? Actually, not belonging as a black professional. And I think it's two parts, and I reflected upon my own growing up. And if you think about the profiling, it's been in the news, and I think many of you on this call have probably gone through it, in terms of police profiling, the stop and search, security guards watching you, or it could be microaggression in the workplace. And I've definitely been subjected to that. Microaggression, again, my definition, it's a very subtle comments like, oh, can you tone it down just a little? You're being a bit too loud, etc. And it's these lived experiences that start to shape in terms of my definition and of imposter syndrome. But let's break it down into two areas of truths and untruths through the optics of my experience. So very quickly, as a black teenager, I quickly realized that there was no difference between perceived assertiveness and aggression, particularly to the police. And I learned very quickly as a teenager, 17, 18 years old with a car, that actually, you've got to pacify you've got to pacify your responses. And the issue with pacifying your responses is twofold. So 17, 18, realize actually there isn't a difference between being aggressive or being assertive. Fast forward that into the workplace. So 21, post-graduation, my first job. You start to take those lived experiences into the workplace, and it becomes part of your work persona. I've got to be passive. I've got to be able to, I don't want to stand out. I want to be able to fit in. And let's just think that through in terms of actually, as a 21-year-old who's basically gone through the educational system, very excited, beating a lot of people to his first jobs, and I'm worried about being too loud, toning myself down and trying to fit in. And I think the one comment I reflect on, and I look back into my history in terms of this whole notion of fitting, because I want to feel like I belong. I don't want anybody to make me feel like I do not belong. But that's probably my first untruth. Just if I just rewind and then go back through that statement, I was made to feel like I don't belong. And that was through racist comments, microaggression. I was made to feel like I don't belong. And why is that an untruth? Because nobody can make you feel like you don't belong. Nobody can do that to you. They can attempt to make you feel like you don't belong, but they can't make you feel like you don't belong. And me not trying to not stand out. So actually, I said, trying to not stand out, trying to be invisible, trying to keep my head down, which is very much an older generation thought process. Keep your head down, work harder, and you'll get through. I'm a 6'4" Black man, and it's impossible for me not to stand out. And usually I'm the only Black man in the room, in a work environment. So how the hell am I not going to stand out? So summary in terms of my quick learning, very, very early in my career, nobody can make you feel like you don't belong. You can only do that to yourself. And I'm always going to stand out. I'm always going to stand out. So for me, belonging is a state of mind. And standing out is a gift. It's a gift. And the decision that we all need to make as professionals, and particularly Black professionals, is what are you going to do with that gift? And let's talk about some other truths in there. So let's roll this back into imposter syndrome as well. In every new position and every new job, you're going to feel anxiety. It can be as simple as, I don't know what they're talking about. How did that person become so knowledgeable? Does everybody get that question besides me? That's normal. I was thinking about it, that's normal. Everybody should feel that. That's humility. That's healthy. Ultimately, you're there in a job, whether it's a new job, existing job, or a new position, you're there to learn. And in order to learn, you need to listen and ask questions. And you ask questions to understand. You want to understand your environment, and you want to, because ultimately you're there to add your experience to solve a problem. And that is the definition of learning. And we all need to do it. And those who don't think they need to do it, well, they need to start learning how. Because actually, how the hell are you going to make a difference in a new job if you're not prepared to listen? You don't need to have all the answers, and you shouldn't have all the answers, particularly in a new role and in a new environment. And I'll leave you with a couple more things. Your hiring manager, and we've heard a lot in terms from a recruitment perspective, your investor, if you have your own business, have seen something in you. Everybody who was speaking before was talking about whether it's a contract role or permanent role. They've seen something in you in which they believe that you can contribute to the success of that department and ultimately the running of that business. Nobody is hired because it was lucky, yeah, or guess what? They felt sorry for me, so I just took them on. Business doesn't work like that. We all know that. And actually, my definition of imposter, my real definition of imposter, is someone who's actually lied on their CV. So if you're going into a job and saying you can do X, Y, and Z, and you can't do X, Y, and Z, you're an imposter. That's not imposter syndrome. You are an imposter. But for the majority of us, who are on this call today, is we were hired because somebody saw our talent. And don't ever forget that. You're hired because of your talent. And our biggest enemy is ourselves. Because once you start bringing doubt, even into unknowns, into your speech, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you start oozing lack of confidence in your conversations, just because you're new, just because it's a new role, just because you're the only Black person or woman in the room, people will start losing confidence in you. And actually, the self-fulfilling prophecies, you therefore will start feeling like you don't belong, and it'll be validated that you don't belong. So, a couple more things from me. I'm sorry I have to rush through this, actually, because it is something that's really close to my heart. I've been forced in many situations. I've had many jobs, as you've heard from me, and many jobs I've been lucky enough to run 2 businesses, and I've worked for a number of corporates, from big organizations to small. The thing that really resonates in me with regards to my mistakes, and I've made plenty of mistakes, it's not the mistake itself. The fear of making a mistake is worse than the actual mistake. Yeah. The fear of failure is actually worse than failure itself. And failure is just a word, because it's how you interpret it and how you learn is what counts. Because people don't remember, most people do not remember the failure. Most people recognize or remember what you did to rectify that mistake. What did you do to make sure you learned and actually could move on? That's what people remember. And it's important, because some people will say around, well, actually, no, I got fired, I got sacked for that mistake. But actually, again, I go back to the definition of failure. Simply, if somebody fired you for making a mistake, the question you need to ask yourself, was that job for me? Was that the right job for me? Do I need to be working in a toxic environment where actually I made a mistake, I fessed up to that mistake, and I was out the door? And actually, why should you feel bad for that? Maybe that environment isn't conducive to your personal goals, and we all need to understand what our personal goals are. So I want to summarize with, I suppose, 5 statements, and I wrote them down because they were important to me as I reflected upon my mistakes. And I've walked away from companies because of the toxic environment. So that's not a failure, that's a recognition of my self-worth. Yeah. So summarizing my thoughts on imposter syndrome and how to deal with it. I'm not going to read them out verbatim. Nobody can make you feel like you don't belong. You can only do that to yourself. Standing out is a gift. It's your superpower. Use it. Yeah. Feeling anxious about a new position or a new role is normal. It shows humility, and it shows that you care. And actually, that for me is the fundamental thing you need to remember in roles. Asking questions demonstrates that actually your hunger to understand the situation and environment in order for you to apply your learnings, which your experience, why you were hired to solve that problem. And learning is continuous. As we sit here and we talk, and I talk about actually my various different roles, I'm always learning. I just came off a call around additional investment, and I was nervous because actually it meant something to me. And 48, and I've been through the rounds before, but I was still nervous. I still had that nervous energy. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is part of who we are. It's part of our DNA as human beings. And nobody hires you accidentally. We talked about this before. Nobody is going to accidentally hire you. Yeah. They saw something in you, and you need to hold on to that. And my last point is one of my first points, is the fear of failure is almost always worse than failure itself. Yeah. Because the definition of failure is in the eyes of the beholder. Instead of beating yourself up about what you failed at, change the narrative, change the scripts, and ask yourself, what did I learn from that? You know, how do I improve next time? Because ultimately, it's about reaching your personal goals. So that's my reflection on imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, for the majority of us, is normal because actually we care about the environments we're in. But nobody on this earth can make you feel like you don't belong. Yeah, you can only do that to yourself.
Love that, man. Love that. Totally made me kind of like think, oh, okay. You know what I mean? I've not really thought about it like that, but it's bloody true. Do you know what I mean? It's true. It's true. Yeah. It's true. And because
right.
you know, and those who know me as well, I go through that because I mean, you mentioned as well about standing out. And yeah, I'm a black guy and I'm 6'10", so I'll stand out in more than you. Do you know what I mean? So it's a bloody nightmare. Been a giant. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, listen, man, we've all got different interpretations of it, and we've all been through that thing. Oh my god, the fear of it. But definitely, from the majority of the individuals in this room today are black individuals, and a lot of the time, as you go through the ranks and you escalate, I know Ron Mazikanda is in here. He's gone for the ranks as well in his career. Super, you know, and so as a black individual, the further you go up, there's less black people around you. That's just the way it is in this country, especially. So again, you're kind of facing that, feeling that vibe, which can be uncomfortable. But I suppose you're saying, don't let that vibe make you feel uncomfortable. And that's a blessing. So yeah, definitely, I love the way you've turned it around. So that's definitely food for thought that everyone should take away from this, really, regardless of our own ethnicity. It's something that we can flip around because we all go for different experiences, whether you're white or black. And so turning it around, I think, is a positive. So I wish we had more time. People are messaging me saying that 24 hours of this, which is great. So Philip, man, as always, man, thank you so much.
All right, brilliant. And if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me as well.
Yeah. We'll put your LinkedIn in the chat below before we end it today. But honestly, man, I'll be in touch later on today. I'll give you a buzz later, or I'll message you later. Yeah.
All right, see you later, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Philip.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Cool. Look, we'll get back onto the imposter syndrome bit in a second, but it's only fair. I want to kind of throw this back in the direction of Rosie and Dajour. Has anyone got any questions about contracting, permanent roles, etc.? Anyone in the room?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go for it.
Hi, Rosie. Hi, Dajour. Hi, everyone. I actually have a question about contracting. I just wanted to ask, do you think the more technical you go, the more likely you are to secure a contract? Because in my previous role, I was a general BA, and I just found it a bit difficult to get BA roles just because I think the roles are becoming a bit more technical. So I just wanted to get your perspective on, you know, the technical side of things and the likelihood of actually securing a contract when you, I guess, obtain those technical skills.
You want me to take this one, Dajour? I know you're late for a meeting, so so I would tend to agree with that. I think contracts usually come for a skills gap, a skills shortage, and it's one of the biggest questions around whether, as Adam mentioned, it's inside or outside IR35. From a BA point of view, it's a really specialist skill set to have because it offers stuff that technical people can't, such as risk analysis, gap analysis. So you will always find the need for more functional roles, I would say, within the market. However, particularly particularly now there is a huge gap in the more technical side of it. So I would say any opportunity you have to develop your technical skills, to be involved on projects where it offers you that opportunity for cross training, that would be a good way to go at the minute, particularly within the data market. One of the things we were going to touch on before we ran way over, apologies for that, was sometimes it's a really good idea to do your time in a permanent role. So do your first 5, 6, 7 years of your career in a permanent role, because what that can offer you is lots of cross-training elements. So you may be on a project as a BA where there is a technical team, so you're working closely to them. You have an opportunity to learn more about the technology that you maybe wouldn't have in a contract. If you're in a permanent employee, they're more likely to develop in you, to invest in you, because you are an employee of theirs. So if you're to stay in a permanent role almost for the first 5, 6, 7 years, you can kind of use your employers for that. You can use them to get exposure to other technologies. You can get them to help you, put you through certain certifications, certain training courses. Ask them, can you shadow the more technical people on the teams to get a bit more exposure there? And what that will do is help you with your soft skills, so your consultancy elements of it, your business analysis elements of it, but also the technical elements of it as well.
Okay.
If that's answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No
Because
problem.
I'm actually in a technical role, but
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, I guess, figure out if there's a way to be less technical and secure contracting. But from your answer, it seems like you would need those necessary skills to kind of, I guess, obtain those good contract roles.
I think it very much depends on your particular skill set and your interest and your focus in your industry. I'm more than happy to put my email address in the chat, and if you wanted
Okay.
to catch up separately in terms of your own skill set, your own
Yeah.
objectives, then I'm more than happy to talk you through them and try and give you some advice. I don't always get it right, but if I don't know, I will find out for you.
Thank you. That would be great.
All right, no problem.
Have you got time for one more question?
Sorry, guys, I've just got to jump off. I'm late for 1 o'clock. But thank you, Ian, for inviting me. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. It was lovely speaking with all of you, and hopefully I'll see you guys again soon.
Yeah, I totally get it. So Adam, I just pinged your message. I know you're a busy guy, Adam. So look, love you to stay clearly. But if you've got a hard stop as well, I know we didn't get a chance. No, that if you need to jump off, then I totally get it. But if not, please stay. Please stay.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Thank you, Dajour. Happy to. Good to see you, Dajour.
Dajour, thanks a lot, buddy. I've just pinged your message. Thanks a lot, man.
All right. Thank you, guys. All right.
All right. Hi. Hello?
Any questions, anyone? Anyone got any questions? I think it's Ron. How you doing, buddy? Good seeing you, man.
Hi, everyone. Really good. I'm really enjoying this. I think I just wanted to add something to the person that asked the last question. I think for someone, I've also hired contractors in my previous roles. The data market is quite interesting. So I would say, look at it like this: you're a problem solver. The more skills you have on the belt, the more bankable you are, the more likely you're able to secure those contracts. Because the way you have to think of it, like, by the time they get a contractor in, they would have probably gone through the organization to try to solve that issue. And then they probably don't have the capacity or the skill set to do it. So be more technical. I'm at the moment I'm training a couple of people who call themselves data analysts. They've probably done like 1 or 2 dashboards in Power BI. And I'm like, oh, that's great, but can you write in DAX? Because I'm like, can you scale this? I need someone who can think about how can I distribute this report to 5,000 people. So think along those lines, cloud, how can I do this report? How, scalability and those things. So you're more likely to get hired that way because,
Okay.
yeah. So if I were you,
sorry about that.
There is a certification which AWS reached out to me about. I think you should do it. It's really, really cool. I think it's called AWS Data Engineer. That is the best thing that's happened so far. Like, just do it. I think it's like £75 right now. I know in 3 months' time it's gonna be 150. So I would say go for it, go and do it, because you're more likely to get hired with that, because it just brings a whole bunch of skills on board, and trust me, you'll be laughing. But yeah, that's my
Speak
two
to Adam as well. When you're ready, speak to Adam about getting them. Yeah.
Okay. Is that AWS engineer you said, Ron?
AWS data engineer.
Data engineer.
Right. Yeah. So if you can do that one and maybe do the cloud project practitioner, just register it, let's say, to do it sometime in January. Read it, do it. Happy to just give you some reading stuff to do, right?
Definitely.
Do the cloud practitioner, which makes you understand about the cloud side of things. But if you do that, I'm telling you, you'll be charging a lot of money. Adam and Rosie will be all over you. But yeah, really, really cool.
Okay. Do you have a LinkedIn, Ron? We can.
Yeah,
connect
yeah,
with-
happy to. Yeah.
Okay.
Contact Ian. I'm happy to
Yeah,
address
yeah.
it.
I'll put you in touch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anya, are we connected, Anya? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
We are, yeah?
We're connected.
Ping me, then I'll ping you over Ron's, Rosie's, and Dajour's and Adam's details.
Okay,
Yeah?
we'll do. Thank you.
Wicked, superb. Anyone else got any questions for Adam, for Rosie, about contracting, or just want to kind of say hello or anything like that?
Just got one.
Cool.
So obviously, I know, like, Ian, you're in Luton, I'm in London, so the prices are a lot different. So this is for Rosie or Adam. Let's say, for example, you was to contract for, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, build up a lot of saving, and obviously you want to now go to buy a place. But obviously it's much more beneficial for you to be permanent, as obviously you stated before. So some people say be in a permanent job for at least 3 months or so, and then try and apply for a house. I mean, what would your advice be on that?
I think from my point of view, I know having recently tried to do this myself, you need to be able to show 3 months income for you to go to any mortgage provider, any lender, anything like that. What they sometimes will do as well is ask for your P60, so they'll look at your overall year earnings as well. And it's almost like what they need to guarantee is that your earnings are consistent enough to lend you X amount of money to buy a house. It's not to say that you can't do it as a limited organization, but I would say you need to be fairly established in that, to show that over the years, even as a contractor, you have a consistent element of income. Adam, you probably know more about that than me, but I think in terms of security, in terms of likelihood to be able to make your mortgage repayment, you would either need to have a permanent job where you can show it's consistent, or have quite a consistent contract and career. Would be my advice on that topic.
Okay.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, I think from our point of view, it would very much depend whether you were a limited company contractor or an umbrella employee. If you were in the contracting space but being paid through an umbrella company, it's more like Rosie's alluded to, you're employed by the umbrella company. You generally need about 3 months worth of pay slips. You would need an assignment that's probably going to last the next 6 months or at least. So when you look at an agency assignment, if you've got a rolling week, then a mortgage provider is going to look quite dimly on that. But if you've got a 6, 12, 18-month assignment, which is quite typical in the skilled space, that's going to look quite good. We work with some sort of contractor specific mortgage providers that understand the space more than the high street banks. So there's always signposting to organisations like that can make it a bit more palatable. But yeah, if you're looking at limited company contracting, typically they're going to want to see 2-3 years worth of accounts. They're going to want HMRC statements to show that your tax return actually mirrors the tax that you've paid and you haven't just edited a PDF or something like that. So it's more of a business owner type scenario. But yeah, umbrella, direct employment, whatever, it's a lot simpler if that's something that you're looking for.
Cool. Nice one. Thank you.
Super stuff. So yeah, definitely we've got a few individuals that are still with us. So thank you so much for that. Has anyone else like to say anything about imposter syndrome, about their own challenges, self-doubt, At all? Anything along those lines? I know it's something that I struggle. I said earlier on before we kind of kicked off with the event, but as a small business owner, and coming up with different solutions or ideas and whatever, I struggle with it often, and so yeah. If there's anyone else who wants to kind of share something in terms of how they may have overcome self-doubt, imposter syndrome on one occasion, does anyone want to say anything about that?
I could maybe back up a wee bit about what Philip was saying from the point of view is they've hired you because they want you. Never think that, you know, you got the job by accident or anything like that. The interview process is designed to, you know, assess what your skills are versus what the job you are going to do. Lots of times, you know, people will hire on potential. So even if you feel you don't have the skills right now, trust in yourself and believe in yourself that they saw that potential in you. It's never a case of no one would ever make an informed business hire on feeling sorry for somebody or, you know, anything like that. It's typically not how it works. So just have the full confidence that if you've been given the job, you've been given it because they have saw something within the interview process on your CV, that either you have the potential to grow into that role and bring real value. And a lot of the time, sometimes people forget as well that businesses can't grow without hiring external talent. It's not to try and mold people into, you know, a job spec or anything like that. They need you as much as you need them. So just have the full confidence and believing in yourself to go in and do that job. Definitely.
And also as well, I say that when individuals are facing repetitive rejection, I've touched on this with Adrian Mensah. I don't know whether he's still with us, but I think he's left. But rejection after rejection after rejection. And so it can damage your confidence and self-belief. But you have to hit that reset button. Because I speak to candidates that I might approach with a vacancy and they sit on their hands, and instead of taking the opportunity to go through the process again, they just say, you know what, I'm taking time out. I'm just going to sit here and write it out, and which really pines me because they get overtaken, opportunities surpass them that they could get, but because they've had so much rejection. So sometimes you take a bit of time out, reset. But don't ever give up in terms of like going for what you deserve, and you know, and because everyone kind of does at some stage in their career may go through that where they get repetitive rejection like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, you know, and you just got to kind of reset, maybe refocus, but don't sit on your hands, where a lot of candidates that I speak to do that, and I've got to try and convince them to give it another go, and it's really, really hard. I had a conversation with somebody last night about this, where they just feel, do you know what, I've just fed up, I'm just going to sit it out and write it out. So don't ever do that, and you do want to just kind of reset and you know, refocus and then give it another shot. So so yeah, cool. Anyone want to add anything else? Move towards conclusion.
I'll be quick. Yeah, I really like this. Yeah, rejection is part of the game. The way I look at it is, it's just a game. You're playing. You're this character. You just need to be focused. Sometimes you meet an obstacle. I look at it as a way to improve myself. The current role I'm working on, I know my LinkedIn is terrible. I need to fix that.
You've been saying that for about a year to me, man.
Ian told me off. It's really not reflective of where I am at the moment. I will fix it. Don't worry, it's coming. The current role I'm working on right now, I think I probably got rejected. I interviewed 25 times for other roles.
Right. Individual companies?
Individual companies with multiple, you know, with like multi-stage interviews, right?
Yeah, right.
And then you get to the end, they're like, you're the perfect role. But they'll say someone more better skilled came to you. Or there's no, or there's, you know, something crazy. So
you want the right fit.
Yeah, or the right fit. That will kind of throws me. I'm like, that's cool. there are other roles where I went in as a contractor, I got the job and everything. You go in, they tell you digital transformation, we need this. I tell them, guys, you need to rechange the way you're doing things. This is not the way to do it. Oh my God, you'll find people prefer to do their, they don't want to change their ways. They want to do in Excel. As data analysts, the people in the data space, we should just destroy Excel sheets, which they should not exist. Anyways, but I know they serve a purpose. But I've found a lot of people who would then who would make it a life mission to get me to get fired or get me to lose that role because I've introduced something different. Do you understand? So I've just come to understand
what they resent you. They resent you.
Yeah. Then there is an element of change management, as in you kind of need to understand that people are doing things in a certain way. So think of an organization where they do everything in Excel sheets. They've got like 15 Excel sheets, a lot of data in there. I'm like, but you should be automating your data pipelines because instead of a job that's normally done by 4 people can be done in a fraction of a second using cloud. Does it make sense? When you tell this to the person, they're like, oh, that means, oh, we're losing, we don't need 3 more people. No, that's not the case. You can retrain those people to do other things. So right. You find if you're then giving a solution to a decision maker, and then the other people come and say, no, this is not the best way, he doesn't know what he's doing, whatever. And I was like, but I've got my certifications here to tell you, and this is my experience of what I've done in the past. It can be done. So understand you're working with the human element, right? People don't like change. You're dealing with people. People want to. So technology is easy. The people element is very difficult. So I don't know. I just, with me, I just charge on. If that doesn't happen, no problem. I'll move on because I'm like, I don't have time. My bills are waiting for me. I need to work. So that's just the. I just keep on.
I think, you're right. Everyone's got to kind of get that focus, man. Because I mean, it's tough out there. It is tough out there.
It is tough, but there are in the tech industry a ton of jobs. A ton of jobs out there. I will work on my LinkedIn. I just need to sit down and just write it out. But it's.
Sorry, I think your reputation allows you to kind of not have that issue. You've done so much. You've done some big gigs. So I think
Yeah. But but. I'll work on
it. Superb. Anyone else want to add anything before we kind of conclude for this afternoon? Cool. Adam, Kelvin, Debs, Momoki, Onye, Olusola, Lawrence, Hope. Guys, thank you so much. Great hosting this event for you guys today. Hope you got some value out of it. Please message me any questions, suggestions. You can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or through the group. But we are going to shut it down.